Well, Boris Johnson has made clear Australia would be expected to stop exporting iron ore to China if China attacked Taiwan. The former British Prime Minister says democracies must stand together, describing war in our region as a nightmarish situation. He spoke exclusively to Jonathan Lea as part of Sky's new AUKUS documentary, Into the Deep, that airs tonight.
As a former British Prime Minister, Boris Johnson has an inside understanding of what would be expected of Australia if China attacked Taiwan.
Give me an answer, Boris, because you're walking a diplomatic line here. Would Australia be expected to stop?
I think we'd all. Sure, the answer is yes. I think we'd all be expected to impose sanctions, economic sanctions, diplomatic sanctions, financial sanctions.
That would be the bare minimum.
On the aggressor. Yeah, that's what happens.
That would be a clear expectation.
Former Defence Minister Linda Reynolds tells me she agrees with Boris Johnson. The retiring senator is willing to say what others in Parliament won't.
Democracy is already at war. It's just that many of us don't see it yet.
So if we're not saying that, are we naive or willfully ignorant?
I think both. I think that Australian policymakers have to be far more honest with the Australian people about what we see.
Beijing has used our iron ore to build the world's largest naval fleet. It's a fact that hasn't gone unnoticed internationally.
They offer a deal. We'll make you rich, you give us what we want.
What Communist China wants, Scott Morrison says, is to control its neighbourhood and ours.
Why do people assume that if there was a conflict involving China aggressively assaulting Taiwan, that it would not be in Australia's interests to do something about that? Of course, arguably it's even more important to our interests than the United States.
Do you see the potential that if the Chinese Communist Party moved on Taiwan, that they could also simultaneously isolate and cut off Australia at the same time to limit our response?
Absolutely they could. So they can do that in a number of ways. They've been mapping subsea cables. They can certainly cut us off. They can cut off our communication satellites, and people don't realise, even just cutting off our GPS in Australia, how vulnerable we actually are.
The lessons from Europe's war loom large.
If China moves on Taiwan, you mean attacks Taiwan?
Absolutely.
I think that's going to be a very, very nightmarish situation.
While Boris Johnson regrets not doing more to defend Ukraine, one thing he doesn't regret is keeping the secret of AUKUS from France and its president, Emmanuel Macron.
It wasn't our secret to share with France. We couldn't have told Paris, I say, by the way, you should know that the Aussies want to rat on your diesel subs deal. No way. Wouldn't have been right.
After the success of the initial AUKUS meeting on the sidelines of the G7 in 2021, the then British PM knew Scott Morrison had a new problem: coming clean. It
was like one of those delicate situations where, you've got a new girlfriend, but you haven't told the old girlfriend, what, I don't know, it was perhaps not a very good analogy, but you know what I mean. It was a tricky situation.
Jonathan Lea, Sky News.
Boris Johnson there, and you can watch the full documentary Into the Deep, Australia's Submarine Gamble, tonight, 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time.